On SportsCenter tonight, we have to talk about what Stephen A. Smith said regarding the New York Knicks, because his words turned a lot of heads. According to Stephen A., the Knicks may have just pulled off the biggest steal of this entire free agency period, and it came in the form of Guerschon Yabusele. Now, Stephen A. emphasized that this move wasn't one many people expected, but it completely changes the outlook of New York's depth and versatility going into this season. He pointed out that while much of the league was looking at other big-name signings, the Knicks quietly secured a player who could very well make a legitimate impact, not only off the bench, but potentially even in a starting role depending on how Tom Thibodeau wants to deploy him. Stephen A. also highlighted the unique path Yabusele has taken to get here. Drafted years ago, he never fully established himself in Boston before heading overseas. But over the last few seasons, especially during international play, he has redefined himself as a physical, versatile forward who can contribute on both ends of the floor. Stephen A. mentioned that his recent performances overseas, including a monster 36-point game where he knocked down 6 threes and added rebounds and blocks, serve as proof that Yabusele is far from a throwaway signing. In fact, Stephen A. said flat out that this was exactly the type of under-the-radar move Leon Rose and the Knicks front office have excelled at, and it could end up paying huge dividends during the grind of the NBA regular season. Now, Stephen A. didn't stop there. He went on to talk about Yabusele's fit on this roster, pointing out that New York's depth at the forward position was already competitive, but adding someone who plays with this level of toughness and defensive intensity makes the Knicks that much harder to scheme against. He explained that Yabusele brings physical defense, strong rebounding, the ability to stretch the floor, and a kind of energy that resonates well in Madison Square Garden. According to Stephen A., he's exactly the kind of player New York fans rally behind: gritty, versatile, and fearless. He even suggested that if the Knicks experiment with different lineups, Yabusele could slot in alongside Mitchell Robinson, or even in smaller ball situations next to Julius Randle, providing spacing and toughness that the Knicks have sometimes lacked. And let's not forget, Stephen A. was very vocal about Leon Rose. He said fans have to give Rose his credit, because every year there seems to be doubt about whether the Knicks president of basketball operations can deliver the right pieces. And every year he finds ways to strengthen the roster. This move with Yabusele, Stephen A. argued, shows not only foresight but also a willingness to take calculated risks that may pay off in ways many around the league don't immediately recognize. But in true Stephen A. fashion, he tied this back to the larger picture. He reminded everyone that the Knicks are not only building a team for now, but also positioning themselves to stay competitive long-term. That means surrounding Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle with complementary players who can provide scoring, toughness, and versatility. In Yabusele, Stephen A. said, the Knicks found a player who embodies exactly that. To cap it all off, he said plainly that if Yabusele carries over this level of play from international competition into the NBA, the rest of the league better watch out. New York just became even more dangerous, and the Knicks front office deserves recognition for seeing the potential that others might have overlooked. That was Stephen A. Smith's perspective, and whether you agree with him or not, one thing is clear: this Knicks team keeps finding ways to make itself more intriguing heading into the season. On SportsCenter tonight, we had Stephen A. Smith weighing in once again on the New York Knicks, and this time his focus was on Guerschon Yabusele. According to Stephen A., what makes Yabusele such a fascinating addition to this Knicks roster isn't just his skill set, it's his mentality. Stephen A. pointed out that Yabusele himself admitted that his DNA is made for New York. He said flat out that he brings passion, anger, fight, and aggression. That type of mentality is what Stephen A. has always said plays best under the bright lights of Madison Square Garden. And the best part, according to him, is that Yabusele doesn't just talk about bringing that type of fire, he backs it up with his play on the floor. Stephen A. went on to break down Yabusele's numbers from last season, where he averaged 27 minutes a night, shot an impressive 38% from beyond the arc, put up 11 points per game, pulled down nearly 6 rebounds, dished out a couple of assists, and played efficient two-way basketball. Those are exactly the kind of contributions New York has been missing from its bench. And Stephen A. made it clear, this is not some filler signing. This is a player who can step into big moments and give the Knicks valuable production on both ends of the floor. He even went as far as to call this a genius signing from Leon Rose, emphasizing once again that the Knicks president of basketball operations continues to show why he is one of the best executives the franchise has ever had. But Stephen A. also brought up the bigger picture. He reminded viewers that Yabusele had opportunities elsewhere, more money on the table, even potential starting roles on other teams, yet he chose the Knicks. Why? Because he wanted to be in New York. He wanted to be in a winning environment, in a city that values toughness and resilience. According to Stephen A., that says everything about the kind of player and person the Knicks are bringing into their locker room. This isn't just about basketball ability, it's about mindset, and Yabusele clearly has the kind of attitude that resonates with the culture the Knicks are building. Stephen A. even hinted that fans shouldn't be shocked if Yabusele's name surfaces in Sixth Man of the Year discussions later in the season, calling him without hesitation the steal of free agency. Now, of course, Stephen A. being Stephen A., he didn't stop with the praise. He shifted the conversation to another headline making waves around the league, and this time, it centered on Ben Simmons. He reacted to the latest reports that Simmons, the former #1 overall pick, may be considering retirement after just 7 years in the NBA. Stephen A. stressed how shocking this fall from grace really is. He reminded everyone that Simmons entered the league with superstar expectations, an oversized playmaker with elite vision, defensive versatility, and the kind of transition game that very few players could match. Yet now, the conversation is not about how he can lead a franchise, it's about whether his body can even hold up enough to keep him in the league. Stephen A. referenced former All-Star Jeff Teague, who has been outspoken about Simmons on his podcast. Teague bluntly said that Simmons looks done, pointing out that he can't move the same way anymore, that he runs like his back is in constant pain, and that the explosiveness that made him dangerous in transition is simply gone. And as Stephen A. explained, when a player whose entire game was built around speed, athleticism, and force in the open court loses that, the decline is inevitable. Simmons is no longer the same dynamic threat he once was. The numbers tell the story, too. Last season, splitting time between Brooklyn and Los Angeles, Simmons averaged just 22 minutes per game, with only 5 points, 5 rebounds, and about 5.5 assists, while shooting a respectable 52% from the field. The defense was still there, but Stephen A. stressed that the explosiveness wasn't. He wasn't attacking the rim with authority, he wasn't flying through the air. And when you're dealing with back injuries, history shows us how rarely players come back the same. Stephen A. even drew comparisons to Steve Nash, who saw his career cut short due to similar issues. Though Nash was at the end of his career, Michael Porter Jr. is one of the few examples of someone battling through back problems and finding a way to return, but Simmons' situation appears far more severe. Executives and scouts across the league seem to agree. Stephen A. cited one anonymous executive who said flatly, "I think his NBA career is over." Oh, that wasn't meant as a shot at Simmons' talent, but simply an acknowledgement that the obstacles are piling up too high. Another scout echoed that sentiment, saying that while some teams may do their due diligence and check in, there's little genuine interest. At best, Simmons could land on a roster as a defensive specialist and ball handler in a reserve role, but he would have to accept limited minutes, maybe 10 a night, sometimes even less. And as Stephen A. pointed out, that's a hard reality for a former All-Star who was once expected to be the face of a franchise. For Stephen A., this situation is not about criticism, it's about disappointment. He said it is truly heartbreaking to see a player with Simmons' talent and potential, a guy who once electrified fans with his playmaking and defense, now facing the possibility of leaving the league far earlier than anyone ever imagined. Injuries are part of the game, but when they rob a player of the very skills that made them special, It's always a tough pill to swallow. So that was Stephen A. Smith tonight on SportsCenter. On one hand, praising Leon Rose and the Knicks for pulling off what he believes is the steal of free agency with Gershon Yabusele, and on the other hand, lamenting the sad decline of Ben Simmons, a player whose career seems to be slipping away far too soon. Two very different stories, but both with major implications for the NBA moving forward. On SportsCenter tonight, I closed the segment on Ben Simmons with something Stephen A. Smith said that really captures the weight of this entire situation. He reminded us that once upon a time, back at LSU and early with the Philadelphia 76ers, Simmons looked like the complete package. He was pushing the ball in transition, making the right reads, attacking the rim with force, and even taking shots with confidence. He was physical, aggressive, and fearless. That was the version of Ben Simmons that earned 3 All-Star appearances and looked like a cornerstone piece for years to come. But as Stephen A. pointed out, that player is gone. What we see now is a shadow of the player he once was, a guy whose back problems and loss of explosiveness have stripped away the very qualities that made him special. Stephen A. said plainly that we just don't see that same Simmons anymore. The dynamic playmaker who once dominated with his size, speed, and vision has been replaced by a version of himself who can't move the same, can't finish the same, and, frankly, no longer plays with the same confidence. It feels like the chapter is closing, and the sad reality is that this is not how anyone thought Simmons' story in the NBA would be written. Still, Stephen A. made it clear that he wishes Simmons the best. If he does step away from the game, it will go down as one of the greatest what-ifs in league history. What if Simmons had stayed healthy? What if his offensive game had continued to develop? What if he had been able to sustain the dominance he showed early in his career? Those are the questions that will linger, if this is indeed the end. So that was Stephen A. Smith tonight, praising the Knicks for the steal of free agency in Gershon Yabusele, but also giving an honest, sobering perspective on the decline of Ben Simmons. And if this really is the final stretch for Simmons, it serves as yet another reminder of just how quickly the game can take away everything from even the most gifted athlete.